Softly, my David's presence wrapped around me like a warm blanket. While my Laura's listening heart seemed to catch even the quietest whispers from deep within me. My emotions trembled, delicate as the breeze slipping through a barely open door. My throat tightened and every word I tried to speak felt like a battle. As though I were holding back a flood of emotions straining to be released, my heartbeat thudded wildly in my chest. My hands clenching the blanket without realizing tension, coursing through me like a silent storm. My breath came uneven, shaky, each inhale a quiet struggle against the rising tide of fear and uncertainty. In the stillness of the room, even the smallest sound echoed loud, sending a jolt through my chest, a signal that perhaps the truth I had buried for so long was ready to surface, and now, here I am, stepping into the light. Hello everyone. My name is May, and today is my day to speak. This is my story. One I thought I could lock away in the deepest parts of my memory, never to be spoken of again. But memories have a way of clinging to you, no matter how tightly I shut the door. They knock dot, they linger. And in this story, I am the one who must take responsibility. It may sound like something torn from a dramatic film, but this isn't fiction. It happened. Every moment, every decision, every consequence was real. And try as I might to erase those memories, they remain etched into the walls of my mind. Replaying again and again, reminding me of what was lost and what I still long to restore. The mistakes I made cast long shadows, shadows that have followed me into every quiet moment. I don't know if I can ever make things right. I don't even know if forgiveness is possible. But I know this. It begins by speaking the truth. I grew up in a coastal town called Carmel by Thessie, California. A small but beautiful place where the waves whispered secrets and the wind carried the scent of salt and memory. My David Alexis owns a popular seafood restaurant that brings visitors from all over. He's strong-willed, incredibly disciplined, and though he's nearing 50, he still carries himself with the strength and vitality of a man half his age. His presence has always been steady, a quiet kind of strength that made me feel safe. My Laura. Sarah was a high school literature teacher, a woman with a soul made of poetry and patience. Each night she'd sit by the window, lost in the worlds of Shakespeare, Austen, or Dickinson. Bathed in the golden light of her reading lamp, she was more than a teacher. She was my moral compass, the voice in my heart that always pointed toward compassion and truth. I was surrounded by love. I was raised by two people who gave me everything they could. And yet, it was me who disrupted that harmony. My parents, who devoted every ounce of their energy and love to raising me, became the pillars of my world. I still remember the joy that flooded my chest every time my David returned home from a long day at work. It was a moment of pure happiness, a sense of belonging so profound that it wrapped around me like a familiar melody. As a little girl, I'd rush to greet him, my arms outstretched, eager to feel the comfort of his embrace. In his arms, I felt protected, like the world outside couldn't touch me. My heart would race with excitement, and I'd twirl in place just to see his smile waiting for that spark of pride in his eyes. It meant everything to me. Those small affirmations, a compliment, a laugh, a gentle pat on the head, they built the foundation of my confidence. Brick by brick. After dinner, our family would gather in the living room. The soft glow of the TV filled the space, and I would settle beside my David on the couch, resting my head against his shoulder. It became a habit, not one of need, but of love. The simple closeness brought me peace. That warmth was a refuge I held on to for years, even as the world around me changed. As I grew older, I began to notice things weren't quite the same. I still reached for those familiar moments. A hug, a touch on the shoulder, but my David, once so expressive, had become quieter in his responses. There was no coldness, only a subtle shift. His eyes carried more thought, his gestures more reserved. I couldn't explain why it hurt, but it did. Maybe it was just part of growing up, that slow fading of childhood magic, where everything once bright becomes muted by time. I didn't blame him. In truth, I missed the closeness that had once come so easily. But I also understood that relationships evolve, and sometimes love shows up in quieter ways, through presence, patience, and quiet understanding. Still, part of me longed for that certainty, the feeling that no matter what, was always someone's little girl. There was a moment when something inside me quietly shifted, a realization I couldn't quite name. The warmth I had always felt in my David's presence had begun to feel different. Not colder, but quieter, as if time itself had placed a gentle distance between us, soft and unspoken. He used to greet me with a familiar spark in his eyes, the same look he had when I'd run to him as a child. But now there was something else in his expression. Thoughtfulness, perhaps. A kind of weariness I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't disappointment, nor rejection. Just the silent acknowledgement that things change. Even between those who love each other deeply. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself it was only in my head, but it lingered. Every time I reached out for a hug or shared a laugh, I could sense a subtle pause, not avoidance, just restraint. Like he was learning how to navigate the space between who I was then and who I had become now. Our relationship had shifted. What was once effortless now carried the quiet complexity of time and growth. And yet, in the stillness of our moments together, I often longed for the simplicity we once knew, a time when his arms felt like home, and his voice could silence every storm inside me. My David, even now, carries himself with quiet strength. He still exercises regularly, maintaining the discipline that defined him for years. His presence commands respect, not through force, but through consistency and calm. When he walks into a room, there's a quiet dignity in the way he moves. Not because of his physique, but because of the life he's lived. Sometimes I catch myself watching him, not in admiration of appearance, but in awe of who he has always been to me. My protector. My compass. My safe place. Maybe what I'm feeling isn't distance at all. Maybe it's the ache of growing up, of realizing that no matter how much love remains, the way we express it changes. We evolve, and so do our bonds. But even as things shift, I know this much is true. He will always be my David, and I will always be his daughter. Something inside me shifted that afternoon, subtle but undeniable. I stepped through the door after a long, draining day at school. The house was still bathed in the soft hum of television light flickering across the walls. My David sat on the sofa, lost in the screen's gentle glow, unaware of my entrance. He looked peaceful, almost frozen in time, the image of someone who had always been a constant in my life. A wave of nostalgia hit me, unannounced. For a moment, I was that little girl again, carefree, certain of her place in the world, wrapped in the security of her parents' love. Without thinking, I walked toward him, longing for that familiar closeness. I lowered myself onto the edge of the couch beside him, leaning slightly against his side, seeking comfort in the echoes of the past. At first, everything felt familiar. The room, the quiet, the rhythm of his breathing. But then something subtle changed. There was a stillness in him that didn't feel the same. Not cold, not distant, just different. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it like the shift in air before a storm. His body tensed ever so slightly. He didn't speak, neither did I, and suddenly the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was heavy, not from anger or blame, but from something we both felt but couldn't name. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just tired. Maybe. He was lost in thought, but the feeling lingered, quiet and persistent. I shifted in my seat, trying to find a more comfortable position. But unease remained, not from him, but from within me, a realization taking shape. I wasn't a little girl anymore. The closeness I once sought without hesitation now arrived with questions I wasn't ready to ask. And maybe he didn't know how to respond anymore either. Just then, the front door creaked. Open. My Laura stepped inside, carrying the soft scent of the outside world. Her presence, as always, grounded the room, her gentle voice breaking the silence like sunlight parting clouds. I instinctively stood up and moved toward her, my feet finally catching up to my thoughts. Behind me, my David remained still, eyes distant, not unfriendly, just older, quieter, and perhaps a little lost in his own way. That day didn't change everything, but it made me realize something important. We were both growing, both trying to hold on to something we didn't know had already begun to change. My heart raced the moment I saw him, not from fear or joy, but from something harder to define. An awareness that something had shifted. Lately, my David had changed. He had begun asking more questions about my day, noticing small details about me that he used to overlook. He'd offer to help with things he never used to, even picking up small items I mentioned in passing. At first, I welcomed it. After all, wasn't this what every child wanted? A parent who paid more attention? But over time, the shift began to feel unfamiliar. One particular evening lingers in my memory. My Laura had just left for a short work trip, something spontaneous that the school had organized. I returned home expecting silence and leftovers instead. The house was filled with the scent of warm food, soft music playing low in the background. The dining table was neatly set. A home-cooked meal, candles, even sparkling cider, a rare touch. A formality in our normally casual household. My David stood in the kitchen, smiling, clearly proud of the surprise. "Thought we could do something different?" he said, a bit awkwardly. "Celebrate you, your grades, your hard work. You've grown up so fast." I smiled back, touched by the gesture. But I also felt unsure. The setting was beautiful, but something about it felt heavy. Maybe it was just how unfamiliar it all was. This sudden closeness from someone who'd spent most of my childhood buried in work. We sat, we ate, we talked. He shared a story from his youth that I had never heard before. I listened, curious but distant. There was an effort in his voice, a reach across time, perhaps trying to reclaim what had faded between us over the years. And yet, I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach. Not because of anything wrong, but because I no longer knew how to respond. Growing up changes things. What once felt natural becomes awkward. What once brought comfort now brings questions. As the meal ended, I thanked him. His pulwi was delicious, and his effort didn't go unnoticed. But as I retreated to my room, I couldn't shake the thought. Sometimes, people try to reconnect too late, not out of malice, but out of guilt or realization. And while the door may still be open, the hallway leading back isn't always easy to walk through. That night didn't change everything, but it did reveal how fragile time can be. And how silence between loved ones, once stretched too long, can echo louder than any words. Victorious, he yearned for a celebration. I could see the pride in his eyes, that quiet spark that only appeared when he truly felt he'd made us proud. A wave of joy swept over me, softening the lines of the long day. I held back my thoughts, choosing instead to savor this rare moment of closeness with my family. We gathered at the table, a feast of laughter, memories, and warmth laid out before us. The wine flowed, not in excess, but enough to loosen the stiff formality that sometimes crept in when years in silence had built walls between us. Candlelight flickered softly, casting golden halos on our faces, as if trying to revive something long buried beneath routine and polite distance. For a brief instant, it felt like time had folded, past and present overlapping in that quiet room. Unremarkable, yet deeply sacred. I caught my David's eyes across the table. For a second, I wasn't sure if I was looking at the man I'd grown up with or someone else, someone older, more fragile, more distant than I remembered. The realization caught me off guard. He'd always been the unshakable one, the quiet pillar. But tonight, something had shifted, or maybe it had always been there, and I'd just learned how to see it. The shadows on the wall moved with us, as if echoing the unspoken. A silence fell, Not uncomfortable, more like a shared breath we didn't realize we were holding together. I reached for my glass again. And as I looked down into the rippling surface of the wine, I felt a sudden urge to say something, anything, that would bridge the widening space between us. "Dad," I said, softly, "do you ever think we stop talking about the things that matter?" He paused. His expression didn't change, but his gaze deepened, like he was looking through time. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. And with that, something inside me relaxed, not resolved, not fixed, but acknowledged. We didn't need to say everything that night, but for the first time in years, it felt like we both remembered the same melody. A quiet understanding hummed between us, the kind that doesn't need words, just presence. With a moment of uncertainty, I stepped into the room. Shadows clung to the walls, thick and heavy, like unsaid truths. The only light came from the faint glow leaking through the cracks of the old wooden shutters, casting soft lines across the floor. For a second, we said nothing. The silence was not empty. It was full, brimming with everything we had buried for so long. He stood across from me, unmoving, as if the weight of the moment had frozen him in place. My breath caught in my throat. The air between us pulsed with a tension that wasn't new, but had never been spoken aloud. When I finally stepped closer, the distance didn't feel physical. It was a distance made of years of questions, of glances that looked away too quickly. He reached for my hand, slowly, cautiously, and for the first time. I didn't pull away. His touch was warm, steady. It wasn't desire that passed between us, but something older, something aching to be acknowledged. We sat on the edge of the bed, side by side. No words, just breath, just presence. There were no declarations, no promises, just two people allowing themselves to exist, unguarded. The world outside faded. No past, no future, only now. Only this fragile, fleeting stillness between two fractured souls trying to feel whole. In that moment, it wasn't passion that overcame us. It was release. The release of silence, of denial, of the fear that had kept us from looking too long. And when he placed his hand over his heart and looked at me as if I were the only truth he'd ever known, I realized not all love is romantic. Some of it is simply the courage to be seen. In the space between us, every gesture, every pause held a weight neither of us dared name. It wasn't simply closeness. It was a reflection of emotions we had spent years suppressing. That night, we didn't speak much. We just sat side by side, two people lost in a moment where time seemed to suspend itself. The next morning, as the world resumed its familiar rhythm, she walked in unaware of the storm that had passed. We exchanged polite words, shared a quiet meal, and smiled through the silence. Yet something had shifted beneath the surface. I caught his glance across the table, a glance that carried a question we dared not voice. We had crossed an invisible threshold, not with action, but with vulnerability. Something had been exposed, and we both knew it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of all that had gone unsaid. Then came a soft knock. I turned and saw him not as he had been, but changed, hesitant. He spoke no words. Lee stood in the doorway, seeking comfort, seeking clarity. I sat up, my voice barely a whisper. We have to be careful, not with her, but with ourselves. This, whatever it is, it has consequences. He nodded, retreating just as quietly as he came, and I was left staring into the dark, unsure of what we had begun or how it would end. The door loomed before her, a silent witness to everything we had tried to hide. My voice faltered, clenched in the grip of something deeper, an ache I couldn't name, a truth I feared would shatter the fragile calm. We pretended to live in I clutched the blanket, bracing against the waves of unease that rippled through me. The room, heavy with silence, seemed to amplify every breath, every flicker of movement. It wasn't love, not in the way others would define it. It was something tangled and raw. Dependence, guilt, memory, a bond that had blurred over time. Time he entered the room, I felt the weight of unspoken history pressing down. A connection forged not by romance, but by a shared escape from loneliness. We were two people trying to survive our own emptiness, caught in something neither of us had the courage to name. When the call came from my Laura, saying she wouldn't be back as planned, a strange quietness settled over us. Not joy, but a relief laced with anxiety. A night with no roles to play. But when she returned the next morning without warning, the silence cracked. Her eyes scanned the room. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. In that moment, I realized what had broken. Not the rules of love, but the fragile trust that held our family together. In an instant, everything was lost. A silence settled over the house. Not peaceful, but suffocating, heavy with heartbreak. My David stood frozen, words caught in his. Throat. My Laura's face crumpled under the weight of betrayal and sorrow. She left without a word, and her absence rang louder than any shout ever could. In the days that followed, the house became a shell of what it once was. My David and I drifted in parallel, too broken to comfort one another, too ashamed to pretend. The divorce came quietly, paperwork replacing conversations, love turning into something sharp and quiet. I wandered through the remnants of a family. I barely recognized what once felt safe had become suffocating. The weight of others' expectations and my own guilt left me motionless. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, only that the path forward would demand a version of me I hadn't yet found. Once, broken family boundaries demand acknowledgement, reflection, and deep respect. There is no love that can restore what was lost through certain choices, no matter how sincere the regret. Standing in the aftermath of my own mistakes, I now face a future clouded by uncertainty. I wrestle with the weight of my actions, torn between the hope of reconciliation and the fear of rejection. I wonder if there's still a place for me in their hearts, or if I've become nothing more than a memory suspended in time. The family I once knew lingers like an echo, one I may never hear again in the same way. The road ahead offers no easy answers, but I must walk it nonetheless. I am prepared for the judgment that may come. I understand that not everyone will understand or forgive, and that's okay. What matters most is the courage to face the truth and the humility to grow from it. To anyone listening, know this. Boundaries exist to protect love, not limit it. Once trust is broken, it is a long and painful road to rebuild. Some mistakes can be healed. Others leave scars that stay with us, shaping who we become. Don't let fleeting emotions blur your clarity. Choose with wisdom. Choose with love. Protect what matters most. In the short time we are given in this life, there is one thing more precious than all others: the chance to honor those who love us. If we lose that, we risk inviting sorrow that lasts a lifetime. Thank you for hearing my story. If this touched you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. Until next time.